Hello, and welcome back to the Seeing Better podcast. I'm Shelby Nix. For anybody who's new here, welcome. I am going to be speaking about how you can read more this year than you have ever before. Now, if that title grabbed your eyes, I hope it did, but I know reading is something that we all want to do more of and oftentimes find many excuses as to why we shouldn't. We are scrolling on our phones, we are staying up late texting with people, we add more work to our plate. It just seems to be one of those things that we want to do, but we never find the time for. So I wanted to share my point of view on how you can read more this year. Having read hundreds of books over the past 6 or so years, I went through a period of self discovery about 6 years ago in 2018 and found that reading was one of my passions. When I was growing up, I definitely liked novels when I was early to chapter books and things like that. But I went through quite a long period of time of not valuing reading as much as I could have at the time. But I found that reading is one of the best ways for me to relax, rewind, and learn. As an adult, I have a quench for knowledge that really cannot be stopped, and I constantly want to learn. So I've done a lot of the research for you on my behalf. I'd like to share what I know to be true and the most productive to read more. Now, I have a caveat here, and that is that one of the themes of the Seeing Better podcast is that we prefer quality over quantity. So I want to make sure that that is clear. So whenever we're looking at books to read, I do want to make sure that they are of value to you. And that value could stem from many different areas. It could be just simply a novel that you really enjoy, and that could be a value to you. But it also could be a business book, a self-help book, anything else that will help you learn more about the world and improve your language skills at that. I know that you can generally tell the people that read because they use really exciting words that aren't generally used in our day-to-day vocabulary being seen on social media. So I thought I would share a quick study that was really interesting to me when I was researching this topic. And this came directly from Health at Harvard. And they did a study where the researchers studied the records of over 5,600 participants in the health and retirement study, is what they called it. And it was an ongoing investigation of people who were 50 or older and had provided information on their reading habits when the study began. Now, this is what was interesting. They determined that the people who read books regularly had a 20% lower risk of dying over the next 12 years compared to the people who weren't readers at all or who read periodicals. I'm not sure exactly what they counted in there, but let's just go with it. This difference remained regardless of race, education, state of health, wealth, material status, and depression. I thought this was super compelling. I'm sure that many people already know the benefits of reading, but it can even extend your lifespan, which I thought was super interesting. I think one of the biggest benefits that I see is the stress reduction. And that's why I recommend to explore if you are at a reading lull or reading rock bottom to start reading before bed. Now, there's an easy way to go about this, which is just to promise yourself that you can read 10 pages of a book before bed, but it could, lead into other things too, if that goes well for a period of time. Reading before bed is so positive in a world where it can be very negative and very overstimulating. I find that reading connects me to my most authentic self and my innermost self that I want to be the next day. It also allows me to let go of some of those things that I was ruminating on earlier in the day and relax before bedtime. I used to read a lot of self-help and business books before bed. However, I've changed my ways about that recently and have steered more towards novels just because it helps me turn off while also learning more about different aspects of life. If reading a self-help or business book is okay for you before bed, by all means, go for it. But that's just been my current schedule. So a couple of other tips that I'd like to share on reading and its effects are as follows. So one of my biggest tips, and I've said this before and I will say it again, is that many of our goals are inhibited by the amount of time that we spend on technology. Now, technology is to our benefit, and we know we can use it as leverage. However, It is so addictive and is made to be addictive, so much so that you may neglect some parts of your goals that you are really going after. So that could include scrolling before bed, which I don't have actual data to support this, but I'm going to guess that is likely most people's answers. They're either scrolling on social media or they are watching television shows, which generally tend to be violent or negative in nature. And that's feeding your mind some junk food before you go to bed when you really have that time to rest and reinvigorate your brain before the next day. So, my tip is to download an app or find a way that you can block these sites and apps before bed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't ever scroll on your phone or watch a TV show, but I do believe if you can get to at least 30 minutes before bedtime, if not an hour is even better, to simply either read, relax, or journal before you go to sleep, I find that you'll be able to extrapolate so many benefits from it that you're going to be shocked that you ever did it before. So I use the app block site on my phone to block any apps that I do not want to be following before this time. I've actually blocked them permanently because I don't want to be scrolling for pretty much any amount of time. It's not something that fits into my 20%, but you can also block it for just certain periods of time in the day. So perhaps you want to aim to get into bed by 10 p.m. and go to sleep by 11, then maybe it is blocked from 10 p.m. to the time that you wake up. It's a bit extreme, I'm aware, but I know that it does work for me, and I am that person that will go past all the barriers that I've tried before to be able to scroll, and this has been the only thing that's really worked. So I highly recommend it if you're having a hard time with that. Identify a regular sleep schedule and stick to it. This is easier said than done, I'm aware, and there are times where I have more flexibility here too. But I will say, if you have a regular sleep schedule that is more or less the same, so you go to bed around the same time and wake up around the same time, it'll allow you to get into that rhythm of creating the habits that you want. So reading before bed, getting relaxed, and diving into a novel or a different world that you're into. Regular sleep schedules help you in so many other areas of your life, but also when it comes to reading more, this will be key. One forgotten medium in reading is audiobooks, and I'm so glad that audiobooks are having such a moment. I was originally subscribed to Audible because that was the premier audiobook app. However, this year, or in 2023, Spotify incorporated a unique feature, and I thought it was so interesting that they did this. They incorporated audiobooks into the monthly subscription for Spotify Premium. Now, this allowed me to be able to cancel my Audible subscription, so I was able to pocket, I don't know, whatever it was, the $7.99 a month, and listen to more audiobooks. There are times where I want to listen to a podcast, but I'm craving more and more a deeper dive on some of the topics that I'm into. So those include biohacking and spirituality and technology and all sorts of things. So I find that if I'm able to listen to an audiobook, I feel really proud of myself for one, and it helps me from being consumed in other low-level tasks that really aren't feeding my 20%. So that's likely going to be scrolling or listening to podcasts or other parts of media that really aren't filling my soul up. And I will say, sometimes all I want to listen to is an episode of The Toast, which I do all the time, and laugh. But I'm also not going to be listening to 100 other pop culture podcasts that really don't feed my mind. So I've only selected the one that I really love, and I do that. And then the rest of the time, I'm either listening to an educational podcast, audiobook, or even some music. My next tip is an oldie but a goodie, and that is to go to the library. I refound going to the library over COVID, and there's something about the treasure hunt of going to the library that is so fun, and it brings out that inner child. I loved that you could come across a book that you would have never had otherwise, and also it's free. That's the best part of it. Part of it is that it's free, and you can check out several books at a time, and they could be of different genres and mediums. And you also have the accountability of having to bring them back. So I hope that we can get into the habit of reading the books and returning them, of course, but also not just letting them sit on the side of your bookcase or of your bed. So going to the library to me is pretty exciting, and I loved that feeling. I'm not really doing it anymore because I have enough books on my bookshelf to read at the moment, but occasionally when I have a day off, I always find that to be a little bit magical. So, highly recommend that if that's not something you've done in a very, very long time, which I'm sure most of you have not. Another way that I love to discover new books and to read more and out of my comfort zone is to go to local thrift stores and used bookstores to do this treasure hunt as well. So I've gone to all the local used bookstores and Goodwills and really anywhere where they have other books. And this is another way that I've found some unexpected reads along the journey. It started during COVID as well when I went to I think it was a Goodwill bookstore. And I always was immersed in whatever they had to offer there and ended up reading a lot of books that I wouldn't have otherwise. And once again, saved a lot of money this way too. While they were not free, they were oftentimes very cheap. So either like $2 to $5 and allowed me to read a whole lot more. So one thing that I really want to impart on you today is that you don't just have to purchase books on Amazon or wherever you buy books in order to read them. They can be found in so many different places. And I just thought of another way as well. And that is the very cute little community book library things that they have around, at least they have it around my city, where you can leave a book and pick up a book. I find that to be an awesome way to find some hidden gems as well. You can also trade books with your friends. I have found a new way to connect with my friends, and that is through trading books and talking about different novels. Oftentimes the novels, the like rom-com type Hallmarky books we're reading, honestly aren't that good, but they're just funny to talk about when it comes to like different tropes like enemies to lovers or I'm forgetting the other ones. But basically the format of a Hallmark movie is basically what they end up being. And you could also start a book club or join a book club. I'm not currently in a book club, but it's always something that I've been wanting to do. I think it depends on like what genre you're really looking for, but I know that this is another way that people have that accountability to read a book at least once a month. My next tip sounds obvious, but I find isn't always that obvious, and that is that you should read what you actually like. I think that there are tendencies to read what we think will make us smarter or learn about something that we don't actually want to learn about, etc., etc. And while that can be helpful at certain points of your life, I do think that by and large you should be reading what you actually like. And that could be just novels. Like maybe you only read novels and you don't read anything else. Great. Well, then read those because you're going to read more. You don't need to have all these books on your shelf that you're never going to read because you're really not interested in them in the first place. So read what you actually like. Stepping one step further, read the books that your heroes wrote. So perhaps you're a fan of some sports person or someone in self-help. Look at all their books and see what they've written. Maybe you can find a couple of tips from their biography or other health, sports, business, self-help related books. That's another way to get a little bit deeper into their minds. And it's a great source of content. Oftentimes there are only certain stories that are told in books versus other pieces of content. So this could be another way that you can expand your horizon and read more as well. I shared this one in my previous episode, but listen to either binaural beats, classical music, or Hertz music while you're reading. This is something that really elevates the experience entirely and helps you focus. I'm going to guess that not being able to focus is another reason why some people have been skeptical of reading, but I can tell you that if you integrate this into your practice, and preferably through headphones as well, you'll be reading way more in no time. Become clear on your priorities, and I'm going to say it, scrolling is not a priority. So become clear on what you want to be, who you want to become. So we talked about your future self. So who does your future self look like in 10 years? Do they read? What do they read? Are they an expert on a specific topic? What are they an expert on? Do they scroll? Do they have practices to stop scrolling? let's think about some of these high mileage questions to get you there. Once you're clear on your priorities, you will know what exactly you want to learn. So for me, I knew that I wanted to increase my productivity and become a very high impact person at work. So I became more attracted to books that had to do with those sorts of topics. And lo and behold, I've been able to build a lot of efficiencies and become somebody who is more invested in the impact versus only the inputs. And therefore, I was able to read all the books that had to do with that topic and create the outcome that I was looking for. Join a reading challenge. So if you are a member of Goodreads, it's free to be a member or download the app, but you can create a reading challenge for yourself. So last year I had the goal to read 50 books, and I did. And this year looks a little bit different for me, but maybe you're just trying to get in the habit of reading, and that's just fine as well. So maybe your challenge is to read one book a month. That's awesome. That's probably more than you did for the past several years. For me this year, what I'm actually aiming to do is to read things that really light me up and that are part of my 20%. So I think I've only read 2 books this year, which is lighter for me than normal, but I'm happy with that because last year I really maximized the amount that I was reading, but this year I'm really looking for the quality versus just the quantity. But wherever you find yourself, I hope that joining a reading challenge can help you and be inspired to read more. I also would like to recommend a product that has helped me read more, and that is the Amber Reading Light from Amazon. So basically what it is it's a clip that you put onto your book, and I find this usually works better with a hardcover book, but paperback works too. So if you don't have a Kindle, the Amber Reading Light helps bring this soft lighting to your reading experience, so you don't have to turn on any lights, and it also gets you into that state where you're a little bit more sleepy and you're just focusing on the page, so you're not looking at all these other blue lights. I really enjoy the reading light and highly recommend it. I will link it in the show notes. Here's another challenge if simply a number on your Goodreads account isn't quite working for you, and that is to have a challenge to read all of the books on your shelf before purchasing any new ones. So it's basically the no buy policy. I know for me, at one point, I had so many books on my shelf that I hadn't read, but I continued to buy more. And that is called overconsumption. Let's be honest. And that's fine. And sometimes it will happen to us. But there came a time where I decided to go ahead and tackle all the books that were already on my shelf. And now I only have a good 5 or so that I have not read. So it can happen. And if you put your mind to it, you can certainly get those books on your reading list if you put your mind to it and if you bring in some of that intentionality. I do not have a Kindle, but I know a lot of people have found a lot of value and joy out of having a Kindle. I do want to try having a Kindle and see how it goes because I do think it can increase the number of books that you read and hopefully the quantity as well, because I do know that they recommend books based on what you've read. So that's a bonus one. I'm here with you. I haven't tried it yet, but I do want to try reading a Kindle and see how I prefer it. Part of the reason I like to read good old-fashioned books is just because I want to be away from technology and I want to be offline as much as possible if I don't have to be in front of a computer or screen. So I still enjoy my paperback and hardcover books. But if you're interested, I would highly recommend getting a Kindle. I know a lot of my friends that have them absolutely love them. And the last one that I have here on the list is that you can start a workbook club. So we do have a workbook club at our office, and that meets once a month, and they have different themes for the books, and the members get to vote on what they want to read. I find that's a great way to get connected with other people and network without having to network. So that could be another way to read more, but also to learn more about your coworkers and maybe meet some people that you wouldn't have otherwise. I don't do this currently. However, I have created my own quasi book club, and that is that any book that I've read that is appropriate, of course, for the office, I leave it at our little bookshelf that I've created. So our little book club at the office. And I'll be honest, not many people have taken up on reading the books, but it still brings me a lot of joy to be able to share that with other people and leave them in the case that somebody does want to read them. There's so much power in books and so many messages that can be shared from reading that really brings me a lot of joy and admiration to my life. I know that reading more is something that's generally on our list for resolutions, and I hope that this episode has inspired you to pick up that book that you've been having lay on your shelf and find some space in your day. If you have time to scroll, you have time to read. And with that being said, this was another episode of the Seeing Better podcast, and I hope that you will have a week full of reading, joy, and inspiration ahead of you. Thank you. Bye.